We were sitting at dinner when Jaden, my wife's son, said it out loud. "You're not family. You're Mom's financial decision." He said it like he was stating the time. Not angry, not loud, just cold, measured. A sentence he'd rehearsed. A sentence he believed. 6 words that folded time in on itself and made the last 5 years vanish like steam. Brooke, my daughter, froze with a piece of chicken halfway to her mouth. Her fork clinked against her plate when she set it down. I kept mine suspended mid-air, still dripping Alfredo sauce. Carol didn't react. She didn't gasp, didn't ask him to apologize. She took another bite of garlic bread and chewed slowly, her eyes drifting past mine like she hadn't heard anything at all. The silence that followed was perfect, symmetrical, like a judgment had been handed down, and no one had the right to appeal. That night I didn't yell. I didn't slam my fist on the table or demand respect. I just cleaned up the plates in silence, loaded the dishwasher, and wiped down the counter. I gave Brooke a nod, and she quietly disappeared upstairs to her room. Then I opened my laptop, logged into our bank accounts, and started unplugging the cables that powered their lives. The rent frozen. The debit card that Carol used for groceries canceled. The automatic transfers to the kids' school accounts gone. Streaming services, gas fund, music subscriptions, even Lexi's makeup subscription box. Shut off like lights in a house no longer lived in. The only thing I left untouched was Brooke's portion. Her school lunches, her phone line, her books. Everything else? Disconnected. I even mailed Jaden a calculator the next morning. A big, bright orange one, with a sticky note taped across the screen. Figure out how much a financial decision costs. He didn't say a word. He just left the box on the counter. Carol picked it up, glanced at it, and put it aside like she was dealing with mail from a stranger. Like it wasn't meant for her son. Like she had no part in any of this. My name is Tom. I'm 42. I live or used to live in a suburb outside San Diego. Beige streets, beige neighbors, beige expectations. I married Carol 6 years ago after meeting her at a parent volunteer event at Brooke's old school. She was warm back then, bright-eyed, curious. She'd laugh in grocery store lines, crack dry jokes, and wear her hair in messy buns that somehow made her look 10 years younger. She had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Jaden and Lexi. Their father, Rick, was a shadow that appeared once or twice a year, usually around holidays or when a new phone dropped. The rest of the time I filled in. I paid the bills. I made the lunches. I replaced sneakers when Jaden outgrew them every 6 months. I shuttled Lexi to and from volleyball practice in a minivan that smelled like old fries and spilled sports drinks. I was the one who held the damn house up like an exhausted pillar, while the man who made them could barely show up for birthdays. But I wasn't family. I was a financial decision. Brooke came to live with us after her mother passed. Liver failure, fast and merciless. She moved in with just 2 duffel bags and a heart full of grief. She barely spoke for the first few weeks, except to ask if she could leave the dinner table early or go to the library alone. Carol was kind at first. She said all the right things. We're so glad to have her. She's part of the family now. But those words faded fast. They were replaced with polite distance, tense smiles, the kind of accommodation you make for a guest who overstays her welcome. Jaden ignored her. Lexi mocked her. And Carol just watched. Occasionally, she'd say, "They're just adjusting." But I saw the smirks. The way Jaden would roll his eyes when Brooke spoke. The way Lexi would whisper things under her breath and laugh when Brooke walked into the room. It wasn't an adjustment. It was dismissal. I kept trying. I really did. I worked extra hours to keep the fridge full, scheduled weekend barbecues, movie nights, game nights. I'd grill ribs, play music, ask about their week. Jaden would shrug. Lexi would scroll through her phone. Carol would give me a tired smile and say, "At least we're together." But togetherness doesn't mean anything if no one wants you there. The week before the dinner, I'd bought Jaden a new calculator for his chemistry exam. His old one had snapped in half at the spine. I didn't even tell him it was from me. Just left it on his desk with a note that said, "Good luck." He didn't thank me, didn't mention it. When he passed the test with an A, Carol posted about it on Facebook. So proud of my brilliant boy, just like his dad. His real dad, Rick. Rick, who sends Amazon gift cards instead of birthday calls. Rick, who shows up once a year with a new pair of Jordans and leaves like a magician, vanishing behind applause that wasn't earned. But he's dad. And I'm a budget line. That night, the Alfredo night, I'd made a full spread. Homemade guacamole, grilled corn, garlic bread, even Carol's favorite limeade. It was meant to be a soft reset. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I made everything feel warm and familiar, the tension would fade. The family would start to stitch itself together. Brooke was finally starting to speak at the table again. I saw her shoulders relax when we all sat down. I saw her reach for the corn with a small smile. For a moment, I believed we were crossing the bridge I'd been building plank by plank for 6 years. Then Jaden said it. Thanks, but the real success will come when my real dad helps. You're just mom's financial decision. And Lexi snorted. That mean adolescent snort that says everything words don't. Carol took another bite. Brooke stood up, quietly, pushed her chair in, walked upstairs without a sound. And I sat there, listening to the scrape of her chair echo through the silence. I waited for Carol to say something, anything, but she just swallowed her food and blinked down at her plate. So I stood up, took my laptop, and walked into the other room. And I started cutting the wires. By midnight, the house was quiet, but the silence felt different. Not the absence of noise, the presence of truth. The kind that crawls into your chest and sits there like ice. Because here's what no one tells you. You can live with people, feed them, raise them, drive them, pay for their everything and still be nothing. You can be the roof over their heads and still be seen as scaffolding. Temporary. Replaceable. Jaden called me a financial decision. So I made one. It wasn't just me they humiliated. Brooke became a stranger in that house long before we left it. Her silence didn't come all at once. It eroded her piece by piece, like rust under paint. I come home and find her curled up on the couch, headphones tight, face blank. She stopped joining dinners, started keeping her light off even during the day. When I asked what was wrong, she'd say she was tired. But it wasn't fatigue, it was exile. Quiet, invisible exile in a house where she was treated like an intruder in her own life. One afternoon, I found her crying in the downstairs bathroom. She had locked the door but forgot to turn the fan on. I heard her sobbing through the vents. I knocked once and said her name. When she opened it, she looked smaller, like the grief had eaten half her height. She whispered, "Lexi said I'm temporary. That when you leave, we won't live here anymore." I stood there, stunned. She had a crumpled tissue in her hand, knuckles white from gripping it. She said, "You'll eventually leave like my real dad did, and then we'll be nothing, just guests." I didn't have words. I didn't know how to explain to a 13-year-old that sometimes you can give everything to a family and still never earn a place in it. Sometimes the seat at the table isn't real, just borrowed. Conditional. I went to Carol. I told her what Lexi said. She sighed like I had brought home a scratch on the car. "They're just expressing themselves," she said. "They're teenagers." It wasn't their age. It was their attitude, their certainty, their entitlement. It was the fact that Carol never said, "Tom is part of our family." Never once. Not when they mocked Brooke. Not when they mocked me. Just passive silence and tired phrases like, "Don't complicate things." But things were already complicated. They were broken. Still, I tried again. One last time. I made burritos and fresh guacamole, Carol's favorite. Set the table, lit a few candles. Played soft music. Tried to make the evening feel like something worth remembering. I thought if I could just create one night of warmth, maybe the cold between us would melt. Jaden sat down last. Hoodie up, phone in hand. I poured him a soda, gave him a nod. "Heard you aced your chemistry test. Good work." He looked up, smirked, and said, "Thanks, but the real success will come when my real dad helps. You're just mom's financial decision." Lexi snorted. Carol took a bite of her burrito and stared at the table. Brooke looked at me, not with surprise, but with recognition. Like she'd heard it all before. Like she was already bracing for the collapse. Then she stood up, quietly, and left the room. I looked at Carol. Her mouth full, chewing slowly. She didn't look at me. She didn't say a word. That's when I knew. There would be no change. No realization. No apology. There was no family. Just tenants, feeding on what I provided and mocking the hand that held the tray. So I got up from the table, walked into my office, and opened my laptop. I started with the rent. Our lease was month to month. I emailed the property manager that night and gave notice. Next came the insurance, canceled. Cell phone plan separated. Brooke and I would be on our own line by morning. Food delivery apps deleted. I sent Brooke a message from the next room. Pack what you care about. We're leaving soon. She replied with one word. Okay. The rest of the night was quiet. Lexi laughed at something on her phone. Jaden played video games. Carol watched reality TV with a blanket over her legs like it was any other Wednesday. They didn't notice the storm I had already set in motion. They wouldn't feel it until the ground gave way. The next morning I made pancakes, Brooke's favorite. Chocolate chip, crispy edges. We ate in the kitchen while the others were still asleep. She smiled at me with swollen eyes, and I told her, "We'll find somewhere with sunlight, somewhere that doesn't punish you for existing." 3 days later, the truck was packed. I took the couch, the dining table, the TV, the beds, all of it. Every item I had bought. Every receipt in my name. Carol came home early from work and saw the truck in the driveway. She stood there, stunned, watching me lift Brooke's bookshelf into the back. "You're taking the furniture?" she said. I handed her a folder of receipts. Every piece. "You're being petty." Jaden walked out and saw the loading ramp. He muttered something about karma. I looked at him and said, "Karma knows my new address." Brooke stood beside me, holding her backpack like a shield. She didn't look at anyone, just waited. We left in silence. No tears, no confrontation, just the sound of tires on concrete and a door closing behind us for the last time. I didn't leave in anger. I left in clarity. That's the difference most people never understand. Rage is loud. It slams doors, throws plates, writes ugly messages in group chats. Clarity? Clarity packs its boxes quietly at dawn and doesn't say goodbye. Clarity makes breakfast, signs a lease in another state, and moves on without asking for permission or forgiveness. 3 days after that dinner, Brooke and I drove north. We passed the state line before noon, her head resting against the window, earbuds in, the sun warming the side of her face. I asked her if she wanted to stop for lunch. She said yes, but only if we could eat somewhere quiet, somewhere no one yells. That was the only request she made. We found a diner in a small town with cheap booths and better silence. Brooke ordered waffles. I watched her eat the whole plate. No picking, no pushing food around. It was the first time I'd seen her finish a meal in weeks. That's when I knew I had made the right call. Our new apartment was small. 1 bedroom for each of us. A narrow balcony. Sunlight that came in at a generous angle every morning. The smell of pine and asphalt. Boise, Idaho. Not glamorous, not exotic, but clean, untouched by their voices, their judgments. Their eyes that looked through me like I was a misprinted page in a story they never asked for. I kept the couch. I kept the TV. I kept the plates I'd bought, the curtains I installed, the rug that had once sat under their feet. I took the things I paid for, not out of spite, but to remind myself that I hadn't imagined the work I did. That the years hadn't vanished just because someone else pretended they didn't count. Carol texted once. That same night. "You could have handled this differently." I didn't reply. What else was there to say? I had handled everything differently for 6 years, with patience, with generosity, with grace. This time I handled it with self-respect. Brooke adjusted quickly. Too quickly, maybe. Kids who've been neglected don't mourn lost homes. They adapt. Like soldiers. Like survivors. Her room was filled with books within the first week. Shelves I mounted myself. Twinkle lights strung across the window. A blanket from her late mother folded at the edge of the bed. She picked out the paint for her walls light sage green. Feels like breathing, she said. She joined a theater club at school, invited friends over, laughed louder, sang while brushing her teeth. One night, while we were watching an old movie on the couch, she said, "I like it here. No one punishes us just for existing." I didn't cry. I just reached over and held her hand until the movie ended. Peace is a strange thing when you haven't had it in years. First, it feels like absence. No slammed doors. No silent treatments. No one weaponizing your sacrifices. No second-guessing your place at the table. You wait for the attack, but it never comes. Eventually, the absence becomes a presence. A quiet rhythm. The sound of your own breathing not being interrupted by contempt. I started cooking again. Not out of obligation, but joy. Pancakes on Saturdays. Pasta on Wednesdays. Brooke helped. We played music. She told me about her classmates, her teachers. She started calling me Dad again. Not because I asked her to. Not because I earned it. But because I stayed when others didn't. Because I chose her over comfort. Over pretending. I began to sleep better. Real sleep. The kind that doesn't feel like a battleground in your chest. I stopped waking up with clenched fists. My shoulders relaxed. My spine uncoiled. And that's when the first real message came from Carol. "We're behind on rent. Can you help? Just this once?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Read the message 3 times. Then typed one sentence. "The financial decision no longer pays your bills. Good luck." I didn't block her. I didn't need to. That message was a wall. I heard through a mutual friend that she tried to take on more clients at the salon, but her hours got cut. Jaden refused to get a part-time job. Lexi started delivering food on a bike her dad bought her. A dad who still couldn't be bothered to show up when things broke down. And me? I stopped keeping track. Jaden didn't go to college. Last I heard, he dropped out after 1 semester. Said it wasn't for him. He works retail now. Weekends. Lexi's still living at home, sharing a room with her mom, wondering how they went from brunches and birthday parties to budgeting dish soap. Funny how fast the world gets smaller when the one holding the roof walks away. I didn't leave out of cruelty. I left because I finally understood the truth. Love without respect is just servitude. I had been a workhorse in a house where I was never invited to sit at the table. I had been the reason they had warmth in winter, lights in summer, and food between the insults. But to them, I was just a transaction. Now I was gone, and the absence was no longer invisible. Brooke and I built a new rhythm. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market. Board game nights. Quiet walks. We hung photos on the wall, just the 2 of us. Laughing. Faces unshadowed. She made honor roll. She gave a speech in front of her class. I filmed it with shaking hands. Afterward, she hugged me and said, "Thanks for never pretending." I didn't know what she meant until later. Until I realized, I never pretended we were fine in that house. I never pretended that love was enough to fix what no one else was willing to repair. I chose truth over comfort, integrity over illusion, and she saw that, felt it, learned from it. I may have lost a marriage, a house, a place at someone else's table, but I gained a daughter back, fully, and her respect. That's not a loss. That's a rescue. A month passed, maybe more. I stopped counting. The days stopped bleeding together once I stopped bleeding for people who never looked back. Then her name lit up my phone. "Carol. Tom, we're behind on rent. Can you help?" No context. No apology. Just a request, like I was still the backup generator. Still the fallback plan. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I typed 6 words. "The financial decision no longer pays." I didn't expect a response, and she didn't disappoint. I never heard from her again, but I heard about her. From a neighbor. From an old mutual friend at the hardware store. The lights were out for a few days. Then the car disappeared, the same one I used to fill with gas every Sunday without being asked. Then the house went quiet. Eventually, a for rent sign appeared in the yard. Turns out side gigs don't keep the heat running. Lexi's makeup tutorials didn't cover the electric bill. Jaden's retail job barely covered his phone plan. And Rick? Rick was still Rick. Occasional texts, digital birthday wishes, no substance, no support. The house they defended like a fortress. It crumbled the moment I stepped off the foundation. Turns out I wasn't the outsider. I was the infrastructure. I didn't rejoice. I didn't gloat. But I remembered. I remembered every silent meal. Every cold shoulder. Every time Carol refused to correct them. Every time I was told, "You're just a man. It's your job." No, it was never my job. It was my choice. A choice I made again and again. Until I didn't. Jaden didn't message. He never said thank you. Never asked where the calculator came from. Never apologized for the insult that collapsed everything. But I heard through someone he didn't go back to school. Couldn't afford to. The scholarship covered only half. And the other half? That was me. That was always me. He's working at a local electronics store now. Selling headphones. Clocks in late sometimes. Still waiting on his real dad to show up with a miracle. Lexi delivers food. Rides a second-hand bike. The kind that wobbles when she pedals. She asked Carol once why I left. Why we didn't stay in touch. Carol told her it was about money. She's not wrong. But it wasn't about the money they wanted, it was about the respect they refused to give. Carol never tried to explain. Never tried to fix it. She had the chance. More than once. She could have drawn a line. Could have said, "Tom belongs here." Could have said, "He's part of this family." Instead, she said nothing. Silence isn't neutral. Silence is permission. And I was done being the man she let her children walk over. Brooke and I started from zero. No legacy furniture. No framed photos. No echoes of other people's mistakes. Just clean walls. Quiet nights. New rules. In our home now, there's no hierarchy of blood. Only mutual care. Only peace. Only truth. And that truth is simple. If you let people treat you like a transaction, don't be shocked when they act like the receipt entitles them to everything, including your dignity. They thought I was just funding the story. They never realized I was writing it. So I'll leave you with this. They lost the man who kept the lights on, kept the bills paid, kept the roof steady. They lost the one who showed up every day, even when unthanked, unwelcomed, unseen. I lost a house. They lost a father. So now I ask you, was I wrong to leave? Or were they wrong to believe I never would?